This coverage of the British Historic Rally Championship is brought to you by Autosessif.com, Skipton Ford, the Tuthill Porsche Challenge, Sherwood Engines, XS Racing and West Wales Rally Spares. Hello, welcome to Bilth Wells for round 4 of the Dunlop Wanna-Go MSA British Historic Rally Championship, the Severn Valley Rally, where the heat, the dust and tyre wear will be the talking point of the day's action. Running first on the road in Category 3 on the Severn Valley Rally were Julian Reynolds and Ian Oakley. And as ever, Reynolds was in blistering form from the very first mile of the stage. Unfortunately, a puncture about halfway through would cost them dearly, and about 30 seconds was lost straight away. Which just made Julian drive a bit faster, of course.
One right, 60, two left, bump, 130, one right, care, 130, one left, 200, two left tight and slippy, 130, two right continues for 100, tightens, brake, four right, brake 40, square right plus, 40, two left.
Reynolds and Oakley were joint quickest and then 0.2 of a second off the fastest time over halfway in Cricken North. But on Caffin, Reynolds suffered a recurrence of his coil problems of the Pirelli Rally.
Brake, tight 5 right, brake, hairpin left.
You can clearly hear the car misfiring, and although it didn't put him out of the rally this time, it did slow him down on the stage. And he was only quickest by 2.5 seconds. Yes, you heard me right, even with his coil failing, Reynolds was still quickest. So this was already proving to be a difficult event for Reynolds, making things so much easier for Nick Elliott and Chris Brooks, you would think. But they had problems of their own to worry about on the very first stage. And with the car not too badly damaged, but not too keen to restart, Elliott called it a day. A bad day, in fact.
Like 2 miles into the first stage, just on a tightening right-hander, a little bit fast in, it just was going to spin. Instead of spinning, it just dug in and flipped us over a couple of times and landed on Chris's side, and really that was that.
These early problems for both Elliott and Reynolds gave Will Onions and Dave Williams the lead in the event, despite the spin on the first stage, on which they were fastest. Onions seems to be the only driver to regularly get close to the pace of the two front runners this year, and it was no surprise to see him leading. But wearing tyres were to cost him dearly on Caffin, and a good 15 seconds would be dropped there. All of which meant that it was Richard Tuthill who took the lead in his Porsche 911. This was the same Tuthill Porsche Challenge car that Francois Delacour had used on the Bulldog Rally, and the 2007 Severn Valley Rally winner was on the pace right from the start, despite a surprising unfamiliarity with the stage start procedure.
What do these lights all mean? They just tick, they count down.
Yeah, I'll count you down now. So right, 5 seconds to go now. Go when it says green, so 1, go. Right 2 long, opens, into right 6 long, 100, left 3, and caution, right 4 long, left 3, and caution, right 4 long, and hairpin left, drop outside.
Richard hadn't rallied for a couple of years, and it showed as it looked like he was driving a real-life PlayStation game. So quick did it all seem.
Into left 6, over bump 40, left 4, left 4.
Left, what's this?
This is left 4, 130, right 6, and caution, right 5 long into right 2. Right 5 long into right 2.
Despite this, Tuthill and co-driver Nick Beach set the joint fastest time on halfway, were fastest on Cricken North by 0.2 of a second from Reynolds, and would get to the halfway point of the day with a 9 seconds lead over Rob Smith and Sean O'Gorman, who were making their return to rallying after their Mid-Wales engine failure, and they were delighted to find themselves right on the pace in their Chevette, with 3 third fastest and 1 second fastest time in the first 4 stages. In third place at this point were Onions and Williams, with Reynolds and Oakey fourth. And then in fifth were Tim Pearcey and Neil Shanks, who were going quickly enough but having a bit of a leery time in their escort with a couple of spins on the first stage alone. Normally within a few seconds of Pearcey are Alan Walker and Jez Rogers, but they were plagued by a misfire throughout the morning, and so were only just inside the top 10. But this left a gap for the crew with the biggest improvement on seeding here by miles. Simon Webster and Pete Cotton would be up to 6th by the midday halt. And then next along were the ever-smiling Squires boys. Their fourth fastest time on stage 1 was their best of the year so far, and further good times would keep them comfortably in the top 10. As ever on gravel events in the Dunlop Wannego British Historic Rally Championship, it was a Category 1 car that had been first away from the start of the rally, with Simon Wallace and Graham Ryde's early season form putting them at the head of the field again, followed by Graham Waite and Jill Cotton. But it was Waite and Cotton who were quickest right from the start, setting a sensational pace, not only being miles quicker than anybody else in the category, but setting times that would have seen them running in the top 10 in Category 2. Behind them came Ricky Profit and John Stangle-Lees in the Porsche. Leading the championship overall has obviously done wonders for Profit's confidence, and why wouldn't it? On the other hand, Simon Wallace seems to have lost a bit of his confidence after his role on the Bulldog Rally, but he was still doing enough to be in third place midway through the day. In fourth were Gwilym Roberts and Debbie Myers. They were having a good battle with Desi Nutt and Jodie McBride, although Nutt and McBride's rally had been compromised when they got caught in the dust of Paul Mankin's struggling Cortina on the very first stage. In Category 2 there was, just as there had been in Category 3, an early retirement for the Pirelli Category winners, Stefan Stoop and Joris Errad, and they too were out of the rally. This left the way clear for another battle between David Stokes and Guy Weaver and Rupert Lomax and David Alcock. But after a first stage in which the two were separated by just a tenth of a second, it was all Stokes for the rest of the morning, as he and Weaver were in sublime form, hardly seeming to be trying, but setting times good enough to get them a 35-second lead after the first 4 stages, although it wasn't without its incidents. For Lomax and Alcock, though, this was a bit of a pounding on this particular morning, as after that promising start, they had a brief off on stage 2, and a bent steering arm meant that they lost more time on the next 2 stages to be well down at the midday halt. This was all good for Chris Brown and Liz Jordan, though, as after a sluggish start on stage 1, they were second fastest on the following 3 stages. And as it always seems to be with Chris Brown, his morning was almost completely without incident. Over the first couple of stages, Dick Slaughter and Martin Taylor were setting a blinding pace in their Class 3 Pinto-engined Escort, and they were actually 4th in the category after 3 stages. But then a puncher and Keffin lost them about 30 seconds, and they dropped to 10th in the category and 4th in class. As a relative newcomer to the Dunlop Wannego MSA British Historic Rally Championship, I have to say that one of the most confusing things about it is recognising the car that Peter Smith is driving on any particular rally. Here we are in only our 2nd season, and this is already the 4th different car that I've seen him in. Just how many more are there? Anyway, Peter was competitive as ever, and he and Russ Langthorne seem almost to have forgotten about their Bulldog disaster now. He's in there somewhere, and indeed emerged eventually to take Slaughter's 4th place. Straight after lunch there was bad luck for Richard Tuthill when he got 2 punctures on his Porsche and was immediately out of the rally, as the Porsche only carries 1 spare, which put Will Onions into the lead. But incredibly, this lead was only 0.1 of a second over his friend and main rival Rob Smith. Imagine that, after 40 minutes of rallying, the gap was only 0.1 of a second. In certain respects, the afternoon was a repeat of the morning stages, but with Crookham North and South joined together to make one 12-mile stage, and the addition of Guibidon. But whatever the stages and their names, it didn't make any difference to Wade's pace as he continued to set fastest time after fastest time, with Ricky Profit just behind him. And although still setting fast times, it was clear that Simon Wallace was going just that little bit quicker. And the Lotus Cortina driver would ease ahead of the Porsche with the second fastest time on Crookham Main, to steal second place from Profit and Stanger Leeds. Although Profit would still win his class and keep the lead in the Dunlop Monaco MSA British Historic Rally Championship. Next along were Willem Roberts and Debbie Myers, who were comfortable throughout the day, and they just held off the other Lotus Cortina of Paul Mankin and Peter Scott in the afternoon, even though Mankin set the joint fastest stage time on halfway. In a disappointing sixth were Desi Nutt and Geraldine McBride. Their puzzling lack of pace in 2011 continues, and Mankin and Scott overhaul them in the afternoon. In Category 2, there was a surprise just after the lunch halt when David Stokes and Guy Weaver retired with a broken half shaft, which could have meant that the Category 2 victory would fall into the hands of Rupert Lomax and David Alcock. But sadly for the crew, Alcock made one of those rare type of mistakes that anyone can make and bumped the car out of the lunchtime halt 9 minutes early, incurring 9 minutes of road penalties, which meant that the car plummeted down the field into almost last place. All of which meant that Chris Brown and Liz Jordan took their first ever BHRC Category 2 victory. And Brown did it in style as well, taking fastest times on halfway and Kefan to win by over a minute. And nobody could say that they didn't deserve it. Next along were Peter Smith and Russ Langthorne. They had a good afternoon as well, with 3 second fastest stage times over the final 4 stages, and banishing forever the thoughts of that Bulldog accident. And in third, after having had an excellent run, were Jeremy Wells and Ken Bowman. They were in the top 6 stage times all day, so that was consistency itself. Without doubt though, the performance of the afternoon in Category 2 came from Dick Slaughter and Martin Taylor in their Class C3 Escort. C3 means in this case that this was a Pinto-engined Escort with about 50 horsepower less than the BD-engined cars, and yet he was 4th, 3rd and then fastest overall over the last 4 stages to pip Terry Cree to the class honours by just 3 seconds. Terry Cree and Richard Shaw were happy enough though. Yes, they were disappointed to lose a class victory on the last stage, but 2nd in class and 5th in the category was their best performance by far. And behind them in 6th were Richard Morgan and Tim Madeley in their C3 Porsche 914, bringing even more variety to the championship. This was also their best performance so far, and they had a class fastest time as well, which is always nice. You can't do much more than be cookies in your class really, can you? In Category 3, Alan Walker and Jez Rogers took 6th in what was their worst overall performance of the championship so far, and it's not so bad when your worst brings you 6th place. Whilst on the other hand, Simon Webster and Pete Cotton had a fantastic rally, finishing it with a superb 2nd quickest on Kevin to take 5th place. Rob Smith was a bit disappointed at the end of the rally, just to take 4th. Although after his season so far, at least it was a result. But after running as high as 2nd place during the day, it was a couple of spins that dropped them to 4th on the final stage. And that was 1 place behind Tim Pearcey and Neil Shanks, who with 2nd, 3rd and 3rd fastest on the last 3 stages finished the rally on a high and took 3rd place by just 0.7 of a second. But all eyes were on the astonishing battle at the front of the field, as Will Onions could feel the gap between him and Julian Reynolds decreasing with every mile. But despite everything that Reynolds could do, it was not enough, as with a bent and tightening steering rack caused by a heavy landing in Gwibberdog, the car was proving harder and harder to drive, and Onions took the victory by just 0.3 of a second, officially the closest ever finish on a BHRC event. This coverage of the British Historic Rally Championship is brought to you by Autosessive.com, Skipton Ford, the Tuthill Porsche Challenge, Sherwood Engines, XS Racing and West Wales Rally Spares.